What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Caves, and today I want to talk about a very big factor and most prominent features about DeepRockGalactic that a lot of people have been talking about in recent months, which is the perk system. The perk system in DeepRockGalactic allows you to further customize your experience and your specific loadout and playstyle, and have specific little abilities that help you out in various situations, from small to large impact, and just give you an extra layer of personalization on top of your build. Now, there are two things that everybody knows about the perk system. The first being that perks are a great way to further enhance your gameplay. There's some fun perks, there's some unique perks, and there's all mannerisms of in between, and overall the perks are relatively fun. The second thing that everybody knows is that the perk system is in dire need of a rework or update to some degree. It is no surprise at this point that people are waiting and expecting for some sort of a perk rework, because over the past several months to years even, people have been saying that the perks just don't feel nearly as impactful as they did in the past. And in some cases, there are perks out there that just straight up do not see play because they're either too niche or too specific, and there are just better options overall for people to run. Not to mention the process of getting perks after a certain amount of time gets pretty tedious, and once you get all of the perks, there's not really much else to it, and you just are kind of there with all of these things that, again, in some cases aren't even really that useful. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how I feel about the perk system, ways that I think that they might be able to fix it, or just potential changes that they might do later on down the line that could help preserve the perk system and make it a much more powerful and impactful tool for DeepRockGalactic than it is right now. By the way, if you like this kind of content and want to see more, be sure to like and subscribe so that way you never miss another upload. So first, in talking about the actual perks themselves and the pros and cons of various different perks, the ones that are really good, the ones that are really bad, and just the overall position as to where a lot of the perks stand in the game right now, I think one of the biggest issues that a lot of people are noticing or taking attention to is that there is a very distinct difference between the perks that are really good and game-changing and can be very useful on builds versus ones that are just kind of there just to be there and don't really see a whole lot of play outside of incredibly niche builds. For example, you guys have heard me say on the channel so many different times that I think personally Resupplier is one of the best passive perks in the entire game. It allows you to both resupply from the pod faster as well as get extra health when you do resupply. This is incredibly useful in basically any build that you want, because both on low and high hazard levels, or in basically any type of mission type that you are on, or in any sort of situation you find yourself in, the ability to just simply resupply faster and be able to heal more is never a real bad thing for you, and you will pretty much never not want something like this. Now, when you compare that to something like, say, Second Wind, which just makes it so that way you sprint for a little bit faster after you're sprinting for a short time, which sure can be useful in some very small instances, but it's pretty clear the level of quality and power between these two particular perks, and those are just a couple of examples. Perks like Born Ready, Thorns, Vampire, and even Sweet Tooth kind of overshadow most of the other passive perks in the entire game. Things like Deep Pockets, Elemental Installation, and Veteran Depositor, which I do like those perks, but they just don't really see a whole lot of play because they're not nearly as viable. Deep Pockets, yeah, it lets you carry some more minerals, but that's not necessarily something that you are craving. And if you are taking this, then that just means that you are giving up another passive perk, which mostly all of them outside of this give you some sort of combat benefit. Elemental Installation is nice in theory because it gives you a lot of elemental resistances, which is great because there are a lot of elemental damage in the game, but at the higher hazard levels it tends to trail off a little bit more and doesn't quite have nearly as much power as you would think. And Veteran Depositor is a unique mechanic, which I really like a lot, but unless you're standing next to Molly at all points, which if you're in a full team is going to be kind of difficult because you're all sharing her, or you're on some sort of a mission type like on-site or point extraction where you're near the deposit point at all times, it doesn't quite have nearly as much power in it. The same thing too could be said for the active perks. Everybody knows my thoughts about Iron Will. I've already made a whole video about that, so if you guys want to hear what I have to say about Iron Will, I'll put a link in the description. But even outside of Iron Will, the difference between some of the high-powered and low-powered active perks, in my opinion, is pretty clear. You have things like Dash and Field Medic that are both insanely powerful perks, but then you have other ones like Hover Boots and See You in Hell, which in my opinion are just not nearly as powerful as the rest of the perks that the classes have access to. Now granted, a lot of this isn't going to necessarily matter when you're at the lower to mid game, and if that's the type of difficulty and playstyle that you like to have, that's fantastic, and this isn't really going to necessarily affect you too much. But still, it kind of brings up the point of, if there are certain perks out there that are just inherently better than others, why even have the other ones to begin with? And again, keep in mind, this is just how I feel about these particular perks. If you are a Hover Boots and Second Wind enjoyer, by all means, go ahead and live your life, and more power to you. I just think that they could definitely change up some of the pre-existing perks to have a little bit more effect. For example, I feel like they could put the passive effect of Second Wind onto Dash and it not really change a whole lot for it. Yes, it would make Dash even more powerful than it already is, but then that would get rid of a passive perk that not many people use and be able to give us the opportunity to get another one that might be useful, or maybe combining certain perks into one individual one. Like, for example, I feel like they could combine Deep Pockets and Strong Arm into one perk and it not really change too much. Or you could combine Strong Arm with Unstoppable. I feel like that would make a lot more sense. The point is, a lot of the perks at this particular point in the game are starting to feel kind of stale, or in some cases just completely irrelevant when compared to other options. And I think that they need to be changed a lot in order to meet the demands of the players that want to see more crazier new abilities. I remember seeing something a while back and I couldn't find it during the recording of this video, but somebody had mentioned the idea of doing some sort of a perk upgrade system where you have sort of a branching upgrade path and you can improve the perks in different ways and choose to specialize them in various situations. So for example, for the Beastmaster perk, you could say tame a Praetorian, but it would last for a significantly less period of time. Or you could tame maybe 2 grunts at a time, but they could only be the basic grunts, something along those lines. Just a way to further improve the perks in one specific way or another to where they still do the job that you want them to do, but perhaps you can specialize them in a different way. For example, for Shield Link, you can make it so that way the active ability, instead of linking to one specific person, instead you make this large AoE burst around you that overcharges the shields of anybody who's in the area when you activate the ability. And for maybe See You in Hell, for example, if you defeat the enemy that damaged you within the time frame that you have the increased damage buff, maybe you get a little bit of health back because you defeated the enemy that hit you, so you took revenge. Something along those lines. The point is, while new perks would obviously be a good addition, and I don't have any ideas off the top of my head as to what new perks could be added in, and if you guys have any ideas, let me know in the comments what you think that they would be. But I also do think that changes to the pre-existing perks and ways to improve them beyond what they normally are would also be a phenomenal way to help increase the customization aspect that the perks have and give us even more ways to outfit ourselves in unique ways. And that's not even getting into the issue of the way in which we unlock perks and purchase them, because the idea behind them is a good concept, but the big issue that I'm sure a lot of people are having right now is we are flooded to the gills with perk points that we pretty much just can't do anything with. If there was a way to use them outside of just unlocking perks, or again, if they rework the system and allow us to use them in a different way, then that would make it a little bit more interesting of a system. I think the basic idea that they have can definitely still work. The idea of completing milestones to get perk points, and then using those perk points to unlock increasing tiers of perks. However, I feel as though there might be a way for them to make it a little bit different, to where it could be a little bit more engaging or rewarding to get these perk points, because at the current moment, there's really no point in completing milestones by the time you get all of the perks. So it literally just feels like a hassle sometimes to check the terminal, because you're just going to be getting all these things that you can't do anything with. If they wanted to make it, instead of just perk points, make it milestone points and give you potentially another in-game shop that you can use the milestones at, that way you could potentially get more ways to customize yourself, that might not be a bad idea. Or again, going back to the upgrade system, if that be the way in which you do the upgrades, that could also be a way to implement the perk points in a different way. The bottom line of this whole entire thing is to say that the perk system desperately needs to be changed and reworked. And the good news is the devs seem to be aware of this. They have mentioned it several times on stream that it is something that they are looking into and something that they want to go forward with eventually, but right now it's just not necessarily something on the docket, because they were working on Season 5 and now they're working on Rogue Core, and after Rogue Core is done, then they're going to probably start working more on Season 6, which then we might see something along those lines, but even that might not be the case. But the good news is that the devs are aware of what people think about the current perk system, and they are aware that people want to see a new and updated one at some point in time in the future. And while the perk system as of right now isn't necessarily something that makes or breaks builds, it's not as if you are going to be completely throwing games if you are not running the proper perks, unless it's Iron Will, but I already made a video about that. But rather, the perks are a nice way for you to add a little bit of extra flair to your builds, but they could be so much more than that if they were implemented in a different way. Although it is a bit of a stretch of comparison and the games are incredibly different in many different ways, but I feel like a perk system similar to how Dead by Daylight does it could work actually pretty well. If you're unfamiliar, the game also has a perk system, but the way that the perks work in that game, they are very game-changing and have severe differences in the way that they implement your playstyle. You could have a completely different set of perks and your playstyle will be insanely different. From movement to protection to information, there are so many different perks, and they all function very differently that you can put together very unique loadouts just with the perks alone. While maybe not necessarily to that egregious of a degree, I feel as though some sort of perk system like that, where the perks have a significantly more impact over the kind of playstyle that you're playing, could be something that would be very useful for DeepRockGalactic in the future. But at the end of the day, this is just how I feel about this whole situation, and one thing I definitely want to know is how you guys feel about all of this. How do you guys feel about the perk system? Do you think it's perfect the way that it is? Do you think it needs to be improved more or less in the way that I described? I want to hear what you guys have to say, so let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Anyways, I hope you guys found this video informative and entertaining. If you did, please be sure to give it a like because it tells me what types of videos you guys want to see. And consider becoming a member today as it really helps me out a lot. Rocket Stone Miners, I will see you in the next video.